The Washington Examiner writes, even the White House has noticed CNN appears to have sidelined pro-Trump contributors. Look, man, not a big fan of CNN, but I think balance is important to an extent, right? I think we all do the best we can. CNN having them on like payroll for contributors, they should probably use them. But apparently they haven't, and now they are sidelining or getting rid of outright. We'll see what happens. But I will stress, for those that aren't familiar, news outlets like CNN, Fox, MSNBC pay for contributorship and call you in when they need you, which means these people are getting paid for nothing. So I can't say it's all bad. Now, here's the other thing. I have another story here. Playboy White House correspondent says he'll sue over suspended credentials. This guy, he's over here, it's Brian Karam. He's also, I believe, a CNN contributor. Yes, he's a contributor to CNN. So we got a couple stories here, and there's a reason why I want to highlight this. I think CNN would do good to bring on these voices, especially after something like this. Okay, Brian Karam yelling at Sebastian Gorka and other, Trump fans that were guests of the White House, and he's yelling at them. Now, admittedly, the guests were yelling at the press first, I believe, but the press should still not cross that line. It's almost like a fourth wall break. So let's read this story, and I started thinking about something funny as I was looking at this, and I'm like, why should I or anyone care? No, but hear me, it's a really good question. Why does anyone care about what CNN is doing? Like, seriously, I was reading the story and I was just like, well, I guess I'll comment on it and talk about CNN, but why don't I don't like, do I care? Like, I mean, I do. Here's what I'm trying to say. CNN is a dumpster fire. They're like on the verge of collapse. There are much more important things to consider. I'm not saying it's not important that the media is sidelining pro-Trump voices. That's a very important issue to talk about. What I don't care about is CNN. Like, they're in a death spiral. They just laid off a bunch of people. They're moving studios. And so, yeah, they're desperately trying to latch on to what remains of the Trump bump, but they are scraping the bottom of the barrel so much they're pulling up wood chips. Like, so in the end, I'm like, who really cares what CNN is doing? They're paying some Trump supporters to do nothing, and their ratings are in the gutter. But you know what? The core idea is really important. The fact that media is becoming increasingly polarized, and this is an example of that. So that's the answer to the question of why should you care? Because I was thinking about it, and I'm just like, I don't care what CNN's doing. I get well, I'll say this: CNN definitely gets more views than I do, but for an individual host who produces an hour of content, which is what I do, I get more views than they do. It's a complicated, breakdown because it's not one for one. It's TV versus the internet. CNN does great on the internet. They get way more views than I do, but that's because they're being propped up by YouTube, which is a whole other point, which I'll actually now bring up, because before we get started, we'll read the story. Go to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address, but of course, share this video if you like it, and that's exactly why. CNN is being propped up by YouTube. Why? You know what CNN does? They film their stupid TV segments and then chop them into bits and upload them. They don't make content for YouTube, for YouTubers, designed for a YouTube audience. Have you noticed that I'm in a little box in the bottom corner of the screen while the source material is the main page? This is a uniquely YouTube style of commentary, journalism, and content that doesn't exist on television. CNN, Fox, MSNBC are being propped up, and they don't even produce for the medium. Why? It's so absurd. But let's get to the core of the story, the meat and potatoes, as it were. Why is CNN sidelining two pro-Trump contributors? The Examiner writes, CNN seems to have sidelined at least two pro-Trump contributors, continuing a trend that critics say includes fewer appearances by conservative commentators on the network. The Hollywood Reporter published comments from sources Friday who said CNN had paused appearances by Trump surrogate Steve Cortez and Republican commentator Ben Ferguson. Both men are paid by CNN, but Cortez has not appeared on the network in over a month, and Ferguson has been off for more than 4 months. Listen, if CNN came to me and said, we want to put you on a contract as a contributor, and we're never going to call you in, who would be nuts? Who would be crazy enough to say no to that? Free money? Don't do work? Thanks, CNN. So while it's bad for the discourse, okay, CNN has its problems, it would be good if they brought in some, a plethora of ideas and perspectives. Sidelining, I don't know if they're sidelining all of their people, but this to me says the discourse is getting more and more polarized. Right now in Portland, I have no idea what's going to go on. Like the Facebook banned an Antifa account. People are bracing for the worst. Starbucks is putting up signs. Yeah, discourse is getting dangerous in this country. That's why I care about this story. That's why this is important. Now, CNN is the airport news network, so in the end, I'm not sure I care all that much specifically about CNN, but the core idea that without this, CNN, again, for all its problems, it's still good they have these people on. Well, they don't anymore. So who is? That's kind of worrying. I think that's probably something we should do over at Subverse, actually do a crossfire kind of thing where we have like a left and a right person have a conversation with a moderator or maybe a centrist. But let's read on. A former CNN contributor said the network would not fire Cortez in order to avoid an uproar. They'll just pay him. They won't fire him because that's just blatant, but they won't book him. And they'll tell all the producers not to book him. That's free money. Well, we call that golden handcuffs, actually, because it means he can't do anything, so it is pretty bad. Cortez's absence from the network appears to follow an explosive segment on Anderson Cooper 360, during which he accused fellow CNN contributor Wajahat Ali of bigotry after Ali said Cortez was cozying up to white nationalists. Oh, heavens. Ferguson also appears to be on hiatus because of a hit from Media Matters, which accused the commentator of running a Facebook page full of bigotry and false information, including attacks on CNN. Earlier this year, the network cut former Congressman Jack Kingston and former South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer, who were both pro-Trump commentators on the network. CNN said, at the time, it was the natural churn of contributors and that they usually do not make these changes public. The lack of pro-Trump commentators has apparently garnered the attention of the Trump administration, too. Even the White House has noticed it, a prominent member of the GOP told The Hollywood Reporter. Now, the next story is CNN and Playboy correspondent suing the White House. So here's the... I'm connecting these, right? There's a reason why I bring this together. For one, CNN contributor, their contributors. This is the guy they keep on. I don't know if they're booking him, but he's a contributor too. So they're both being kept on for sure. But this is a guy who's yelling at guests of the president. Look, man, it's one thing to say you're not going to book a Trump supporter. There's a million reasons why that could be. A Media Matters hit piece or an explosive and offensive segment, and you're like, it's bad for business. It's another thing to be like, we're keeping on a contributor who is yelling at the president's guests. You see the difference here? You've got two guys one guy who made a political argument. Let's ignore the Media Matters hit piece because that's complicated. You got one guy who had an explosive argument that I haven't booked him for over a month. And you got this guy who's yelling at guests of the president. One is absolutely worse than the other. I offer no excuses for the guests of the White House who were heckling the press, which they were. I got up and I was there, okay? For those that don't know, I was invited to the White House. I sat in the Rose Garden, and then within a few minutes, I'm like, I don't want to have anything. I don't want to be here. This is nuts. And I got up and I walked around to where the staff was standing, and I just sat up against the wall. And then I started feeling a little sick because I hadn't eaten all day. I actually don't eat until I'm done working. It's amazing because I seem like I'm hopped up on something all the time, right? I'm very excitable. So I left. I was like, look, the event is over. Trump is going to be giving a presentation about something or another. People were heckling. The press was heckling back. This fight breaks out. So I'm out. I left before the fight broke out, but I could see that there was like, I'm like, man, it's not a place I want to be. But the point is, look, the guests of the White House are rowdy, excited, having fun, and yeah, heckling the press. The press essentially, Karam specifically pulls this, what I would say is akin to kind of like a fourth wall break or a break of decorum, by heckling back and yelling at people and then calling out to Gorka, and Gorka didn't start this. And that's the problem. Brian Karam is suing, claiming that he shouldn't have been suspended. You know what, man? You heckle guests. Imagine this. Imagine a delegation from Saudi Arabia shows up. And they're sitting there and they look over the press and start hollering things. So this guy threatens one of the delegates, like, or a member of the delegation. Like, do you have any idea how insane that would be? There is no excuse for shouting at guests of the White House, period. Like, that's dangerous. And you know what this shows? It shows that, for one, obviously Trump's people don't have respect for the journalists behind the line. But that doesn't mean they were wrong to do it. But Brian Karam was way more in the wrong to tell Gorka, we'll take it outside. So I guess the main point I'm trying to make is, because I'm kind of deviating off into to this older story. For one, the press shouldn't be playing this game of hollering at people just because someone was mean to them. But I think about Brian Karem is a CNN contributor, right? So I want to make sure I make this clear. They haven't fired him, and they also haven't fired these guys. But it's interesting. I'm not saying they've booked Karem. I don't know if he's been booked recently. So I'm just pointing out, you've got 3 contributors. The Trump supporters are not being booked allegedly because of a hostile segment or because of a hit. Brian Karem literally hollered at guests it's so much worse. So, long story short, CNN is trash. And, before I'll throw it back to the thing I said in the beginning. Before I started recording, I was reading the story and then I started laughing. Like, seriously, I just started laughing. And I was like, I don't care. Like, I really don't care what CNN is doing because they're just in the gutter. They're gone. And so I was actually not going to record. I was actually thinking, you know what, I'll pull up something else. There's like a Hillary Clinton email thing, which I've been digging into. We'll see if I get to it. And then I thought, no, look, the core idea is extremely important. What we see from the White House event with Gorka and Karem is suing shows that CNN contributors are crossing this line and engaging in like this weird, unprofessional behavior. And CNN is not even booking pro-Trump personalities anymore. So look at it this way. CNN isn't booking the pro-Trump people, has actually fired a couple, and they have this guy who's literally yelling at guests of the White House. And I'm just like, things are breaking down, man. Like, things are breaking down in a weird way. I'm not saying it's going to completely collapse. I don't know. People have questioned me and said that they disagree on my bullishness for a coming civil conflict of some sort. But I think the problem with that is people are assuming I'm saying it's going to be like armies forming and running through the streets. I'm like, dude, it's what we're seeing now almost. Like we're in the opening, volley or whatever you want to call it with these street battles. And it's not my opinion. There's been numerous people, left, right, and security professionals who have given statements saying like, this is it. The point I'm trying to make is, I'm not saying the world is ending. Of course not. But it does seem weird. CNN's ratings are in the trash continually. These weird things are happening. They're not booking these people. They're firing these people. And it just seems like we are just moving in one direction. Discourse is breaking down. Fights are nearly breaking out. Fights in Portland today. And everything just seems like insanity. And this is actually the next segment I'm going to be doing. So stick around. YouTube.com/Timcast at 4 p.m. Did you know Trump's approval rating is at a near all-time high and a record high in the African American community? And at the same time, his disapproval is at a near all-time high, and he's simultaneously being projected to win and lose. So I'm just sitting here thinking like, depending on which source you're reading, you live in a different reality, and that's the craziness. CNN's removal of these people shows the fracture is getting worse. I'll leave it there. Stick around. 4 p.m. YouTube.com/Timcast. Yes, it is a different channel from this. Don't ask me why YouTube branded this one Timcast and the other one Tim Pool, and the other one is actually YouTube.com/Timcast. I have no idea. But I will see you there. So thanks for hanging out. Stick around.